So I have found that there's a certain story on the navagrahas, and I found that story to be very helpful in remembering what each graha stands for. Hmm? So, and this story, it's not in the Vedas. Right? It is a story that is passed on by teacher to student, and that's how it's been carried forward. And it's the story of this wise old king, hmm, who has a huge kingdom, and he is
Whose name is?
I'll tell you. Yeah. And he has this huge kingdom, it's really prospering, and he feels his time has come. And his queen, his beloved queen, he loves her so much, she'll do anything for him. And she comes to him and says, you need to let go. You need to let go. And he's holding on. He doesn't want to let go. And he says, I love you so much that I will let go.
Let go of
Responsibilities
ruling
of ruling, of different domains, of
earning money, bringing bread to the table, all that.
all of that.
Okay.
And he says, let me call my general, the commander of my army. And she says, no, you have to call your son first. He is the one who needs to inherit what you are asking for, what you are ruling at the moment. Do you know who the king and queen are?
I think so. Let's see.
So the king is the sun, right? And the queen is the moon, right? And the two of them together. And so this dialogue is between the king and the queen. And they call their first son. They call their son. And they say, look, this is what your mother is telling me, he says. So you decide what you want. He looks at his mother, he looks at his father, and he says, he's a prince, and he wants to really control the kingdom. And for him, what really controls the kingdom are two things. One is everything to do with knowledge, everything to do with education and studies, because then you control people from their childhood. What ideas to plant, what they learn.
How they think.
How they think.
How they consume.
And consumption is the second one. He wants to control everything about trade, what people define as beauty, where people put their attention. Trade and commerce. So these are the two areas that he wants to take over. And the king says, okay, wish granted. You lead everything related to education and everything related to trade and commerce and details and perfection. And do you know who this sun is? It's Mercury. Right? These are the facets of Mercury. And then they say, okay, if we've called Mercury, the obvious next choice would be this princess. Right? Would be Venus. And Venus comes forth into the kingdom, head held high. She's beautiful, flowers in the hair and lovely clothes. And the king asks her, my queen is saying you can take over something. What else will the princess ask for? Than beauty, grace, relations, and comforts and joys and equality amongst all the masses, justice and fairness in society, fulfillment in oneself, the archetype of the princess, the archetype of finding fulfillment in oneself, to such an extent that you don't need to find fulfillment outside. You reside in yourself. And the king says, you take this over. So, yeah, so you've got the prince and you've got the princess. And now the king says, it's enough of these people. Now I want to call my trusted lieutenant, the commander of the army, the warrior general, who listens to what I say and what I want, which is Mars, right? The commander of the army. And what Mars wants, what this general wants, is to protect the kingdom, is to put into action what the king desires. And that is what he takes over: initiative, leadership, making sure that everything is going as per plan, diving deep and making sure nothing is hidden that is against the wishes of the king. Right? So bringing to surface what lies deep within, right? But through force and strength. And he's got all the resources, the army, the navy, everything. He's got it all. That's Mars. The archetype of in the tarot, this is the chariot. In the major arcana, the card of strength. The warrior general. The next person that the king calls is the priest. And what the priest wants, Jupiter, is to govern ethics in the kingdom, morality and ethics, wisdom, higher knowledge, the grace that helps everybody prosper, goodwill and joyousness. Like the priest who's always smiling, the laughing Buddha, for instance. It's so typical of Jupiter, large and full of joy. And that's how I always imagine Jupiter. The king says, okay, you've asked for something and you've got it. And he turns to his queen and he says, I've done my duty. And the queen says, not yet, not yet. What about your eldest son? It so happens that this king and queen had a son who was born dark, completely opposite to how the king looks, fair and illustrious and glorious. And they had a dark looking son, born with a limp, who could not walk. And he didn't accept him as a son, and he banished him outside the kingdom. So the son left and went far away, making a journey slowly across his father.
Limping.
Because he's limping,
So
because he goes slowly. And this is Saturn, Shani. And when the son says, let's call Shani, I want to ask him what he wants, Shani comes. He bows down, he goes on his knees, and he tells the king, you tell me what to take. I completely surrender to what you want me to do. And the son says, okay, in that case, you rule hard work. You take over patience and perseverance and structure and discipline, everything that all the others have not taken. You rule the downtrodden, the outcast, those who have been banished. And Shani says, so be it. You want me to take this over, I will. But I will also take over one thing else. That which defies your authority. The son is aghast. He looks at his queen.
The king.
The son.
The son, yes.
The son, the king, is aghast. And he looks at his queen. And the queen says, so be it. You rule whatever challenges authority. But from that space of humility and surrender. And Shani says, Saturn says, yes, okay. And there you have the story of the planetary cabinet. And this has helped me go so deep into what each planet governs, the keywords, the significations. And you can always build on this story. This is the story as it was told to me, but I have upgraded the story to include Rahu and Ketu, to include exaltations and debilitations, to include Mula Trikonas, all different things that we need in Vedic astrology. But yeah, this story, it always helps people remember.
We have explained a lot about how planets act on our lives, how stars and planets influence our lives. And traditional astrologers would tend to give kind of remedies to counter the effects or to how. What do you think about this way of doing it?
So I have a slightly different view on what you're referring to as remedies. So if we go back to that analogy of the river, the river is flowing at a certain pace.
Which was, you can just maybe remind the
Yeah.
analogy of the life
Yeah,
as a river that we have to cross.
yeah. So the analogy is that you've stepped into a river and you're trying to cross that river. And what astrology does is to understand how that river is flowing. Right? That's how I approach astrology. How deep is the river? How strong are the currents? Now, if you are not able to cross because the currents are too strong, and you ask the astrologer to change the currents, doesn't work. The astrologer can't change the currents in your life, right? You are facing those currents because you happen to be in that part of the river. Why are you in that part of the river? Because you swam in a certain way in the past, which brought you to that part of the river. So now you have to figure out, decide where you want to go in the river. But the currents in the river at where you are now, my belief is that they can't be changed. So the question arises, then what's the point of remedy?
And just so that people know what we are talking about, what are these remedies?
Right, good question. No, so remedies that are usually given are mantras, japa,
Yeah.
japa, which is repetition, gemstones, or you have yagna. Yagna meaning a ritual, a sacrifice in a temple, or going to certain temples, praying to a certain god. Yeah, these are some of the usual remedies, or donating to a certain charity organization, feeding a certain animal.
I've realized that now you can order your puja online, for instance, and you pay so and so, and they will do this.
Yeah. So yeah, the question then becomes, what's the point? I mean, should I do that or not? No? I feel you should totally do it, but the intention is to strengthen oneself rather than to change the outside. So if we go back to that analogy of the river, the remedies help you learn how to swim. The remedies strengthen your thighs, strengthen your body, so then you can swim against those currents.
Or your mind.
Or your mind, or your soul, your inner self. You're working on yourself rather than on the external world.
It is true that very often in India, where people are believers, and where religion is part of everyday life. Religion, not spirituality, but people tend to do the remedies in a very religious way, sort of. And that's something that in the West seems a little out of place. For instance, one could question the fact of singing mantras, that what I'm teaching to my students, for instance. I always present things in a way that you are not singing a mantra to Mars. Alors, maybe you will please him by doing so if you do believe in that. But the main thing is that it brings your awareness to the qualities that need to be enhanced in you and the things that you can change or be more aware about. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would change that. You said a very beautiful sentence. You said that you will please Mars. So stay with the same sentence, but rather say, please the Mars in me.
You, exactly.
Yeah. So the strength in me, the warrior in me, the one who has command of all the resources in me. To that I pray. To that I want to bring that out.
It's a way to once again link macrocosm and
With the
microcosm.
micro. Yeah. Absolutely.